And now we're going to do some database programming basics rather with Visual Basic. What we'll do, we'll close the sports test project that we used to just illustrate the configuration process. So we'll close that solution, and I'm going to close the Server Explorer and the toolbox, and just have a blank Microsoft Visual Studio environment, which I'll then use to open already existing sporting goods project. It will be also under databases and lectures folder as well for you to open up. So I'm going to go and open up that sporting goods project, and after it loads, you will notice they already have some forms predefined. If you right click on customer age to view the designer, you will notice that I already have some of these binding sources, the same binding source, sporting goods data set and customer table adapter I finished with the last video. So overall, okay, we'll use the hands-on coding for the customer age or cust age and cust city forms, and we'll only discuss and run the existing code for a little bit more complicated, not terribly so, but a little bit more complicated functionality in these FRM cust orders, FRM order entry forms. Okay, so let's start with the FRM cust age. The functionality behind FRM cust age is relatively simple, as the design of the form sort of shows. We want to query the customer table, which is why we have the customer table adapter here bound through this from the sporting goods data set to the database. So we want to query the customer table and display the last name comma first name in this list box here for all the customers that are 40 or years of age or over from certain Midwestern states listed here: Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Okay, and in the process, we want to calculate the average age of all those customers that satisfy these conditions. Okay, so we're going to switch to the code, and then you will recall that the wizard automatically inserts the lines of code, or the single line of code really here, that loads the table data, customer in this case, into customer data set right here. This is the customer data set. Okay, through that customer table adapter right here using that fill method. Okay, so you can think of it, the customer table adapter, the bridge between the database and this VB project, is filling this customer data set, which we then can use for the purposes of running these queries and doing anything else. Okay, so now there's nothing else to do in the form load event. We're going to switch down to the click event of that display click event of that button, and the first thing we'll do is we'll need to define the connection string to the sporting goods access database. Okay, so the connection string can be found in app or app.config file. If you open it, you'll notice the connection string is given right here, starting with this double quote and going all the way to the end. Sometimes, or a lot of times, especially when you're sort of testing and developing things, it's good to have a direct path to your database, because sometimes these can be kind of finicky. But right now we're going to use it as it is. We're going to copy the string, we're going to close the app.config file, and we're going to create our connection string variable, dim, right here after the first comment, dim strconn as string, and then assign it to that string pasted directly from that config file. Okay, so the next thing to do is to actually design the SQL query and create a query string. Okay, by selecting last name, first name, and age of customers 40 or older from states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, as Iowa, as was already indicated. What I'll do first is, I'll save the project. I'm going to switch to the database, okay, the actual database, and the place where I'm going to do that will be let's see, in scripts sporting goods. Okay, so you should use the databases lectures and sporting goods. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which version of the database you use. We don't have way too many because it gets confusing. I'm going to double click to open it, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to first show you the customer age query as I designed it using the design view. Okay, so what I'll do is, so this, the best thing to do is really to start sort of this from scratch, right? So I'm going to create a new query design. I'm going to drop the customer table. I'm not going to save it as I already have it here, and I'm going to drop the, as I said, last name, first name, and age. Okay, for those customers are 40 years or older. I also need the state as well. I'm not going to show the age and state. The criteria is going to be greater than or equal to 40, and for the state I'm going to have MN or WI or what was it, Iowa, IA as a criteria. Okay, and if I run this, you will notice the 8 customers, and I also want them sorted by last name. So I'll go back here and add that last name ascending sort. Okay, so have these customers from Blakely to White. All right, now the reason I'm doing this is that you can switch then to the SQL view, and admittedly it's probably illegible from the recording, but if you actually do it, you'll see the select statement with customer in the last name, first name from customer, where customer age is greater than or equal to 40, and customer state is either MN or WI or II, and then ordered by last name. So you can use this SQL script that's auto-generated through this, design view process that I just illustrated to help you understand the code that I'm about to type back in the Microsoft Visual Studio project for this example. Okay, so the script, is a direct modification of that SQL script I just showed you. I omit, certain customer table references when referencing the columns because I don't need to, and some excessive use of parentheses, but it comes down to the following. So dim str query as string equals, and this is just the beginning of the string. You put both sets of double quotes, and then you have to select last name comma first name. Those are the 2 columns. The capitalization select is not necessary. I just do it out of habit. Okay, then I'm going to also use age, although I don't really need to display it, from customer. Okay, I'm going to add a space here, so make sure whenever you finish a sort of line of SQL string, you add a space because you're going to tend to forget it when you concatenate in the next line, which is str query and concatenate equal. Okay, and then the next part of the string, query string, okay, which is the where clause, where age is greater than or equal to 40, and open close parentheses. Inside the parentheses I have a state requirement. State is in single quotes MN, so the single quotes are required here instead of double quotes because you already have the double quotes enclosing the entire string. Okay, or state is in single quotes WI, or state is in single quotes IA for Iowa. Again, I'm going to add after the closing parenthesis a space, and I'm going to then append the final piece of the query, which is the order by last name. Okay, so I'm going to save all these changes, and I have my my query data string. Now, if I get any errors later on when I use this, when I run essentially the query with this query string, it's probably because of some missed parenthesis, single quote, double quote, comma, the standard stuff that you're familiar with from, from the database class, or just at least the intro programming class, right? You have to basically then troubleshoot the syntax. Okay, so the next step is to set up the data adapter as a bridge between the data set and the resulting data set, as the comment states. So I'm going to dim the AP customer cust age, cust age, just to give it the same name as new OLEDB. Okay, so this is this reference to the sort of, you can think of it as access library of classes and tools, one of which is the data adapter right here, fifth from the top, I believe. Okay, which is then at the same time initialized and set with the str query using that str connection, right? So you need no ones. So you need the query itself, which we just defined, and the connection string, which was defined at the top, to essentially run this query, against the database through this adapter that needs that connection to connect to the database. Okay, so essentially after this line of code, the query is executed against the database. Okay, and then we're going to use that data adapter to fill the resulting data set, which we'll call dim dst cust age as new data set. Okay, and then we're going to use the adapter dap cust age and its fill method to fill that data set dst cust age with the result of that query, right? So that's very similar. If you look at the structure of this line, it's very similar to that adapter filling the sporting goods data set customer table, essentially, right? So this is just an ad hoc query rather than the entire table. Okay, so after this step, what is left to do is to display these customers' last names and first names in the list box. But in addition to that, what we want to do is find the average age for those same customers. So although there is a quicker, essentially one-line way to attach the data set that we just filled here with those last and first names for the customers 40 years or over from these states, right, to that list box. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually go step by step through the data set and use that step-by-step approach to accumulate the average, the age, and then divide by the total number of records to get that average age. So long story longer, we need a couple of more variables, starting with dim num rows as integer, initialize to 0. That's going to count the number of rows. Those are the 8 rows from that query, right? Okay. Then we're going to count them. Okay, so we're going to initialize it by using the dst cust age data set, and the first and only table 0. So this looks a little weird. The data set and the data table are really for us the same thing, because this data set has only one data table. In theory, or practice, I guess, the data set can have multiple tables, but we'll never really have that. Then we'll look at the rows property, and then the count property of that. So that's going to give us essentially that number 8 I just showed you. Okay, then we're going to loop through the rows, and the way we're going to do it is we're going to use for each construct, and we're going to use the dsr row. This is the variable that I could have defined before, but I'm going to just define it on the fly as data row, okay, in this dst customer age data set and its only table and the collection essentially of these rows. Okay, so this is going to loop through those 8 rows. Okay, and using, okay, the reason I needed to include the age, whereas that did not include that in the access query, and I should have, so I'm going to check that right, is because I needed to calculate the average rather than display it. Okay, so I'm going to first of all list in the customers table, list box, sorry, items dot add the standard add procedure for the list box. I'm going to use DSR row, that's the row, and I'm going to use the item to access the individual columns. Again, zero base. So this is essentially the first column, which for us is the last name. Okay, so I'm going to concatenate that with a comma, space, and then the first name, which is DSR row dot item of 1. Just make sure you get all the parentheses right. Okay, then I'm going to declare a average age variable right before the loop after this count. So dim avg age as double, initialize it to 0. I'm going to increment that here. Avg age is incremented by DSR row dot item of 2. Okay, so the second, or rather third column in the zero based numbering is the age from the string. So this is going to accumulate all those ages shown here, 41 plus 47 plus 52 all the way to the bottom. Okay, and once I have them all accumulated after the loop, I'm going to display it in the text box the average age to string, right, to string with some format and 1 with 1 decimal divided by number of those rows. Okay, so the total of those ages divided by 8 is going to be the average. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to sort of double check it, make sure that the project has the customer age rather than some other format as the startup form, and then run it, and then troubleshoot any errors. Okay, there's a slight delay in connection with the database, as you probably noticed, but those 8 names, right, from Blakely to White, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 are displayed, and the average age is 47.25. So let's try to remember that number, 47.25. I can switch back to access, just copy this column, right, copy this column, go to Excel quickly, quickly if I can, and put all this into view at the same time. Not gonna be easy, but we can do it. Okay, yeah, I have a hard time grabbing that, and then paste these guys and highlight the numbers and get the average, read off the average as 48. Oh, I forgot the last one. 47.25. All right, 47.25. So that matches. Okay, don't save, close, switch back to the presentation. Okay, so this slide, what was it, number 8, essentially discusses the major themes of this FRM cust age functionality. And before continuing with the next form, which is FRM cust city, in the next video we're going to pause.